So this saw was driving me crazy. I'd tension the chain properly, make a few cuts, and within minutes, the chain was hanging loose again. And not hanging loose in a good way. In this video, we're going to break down the most common causes of a chain coming loose, and I'll show you the one issue that I believe was the main culprit on my saw having this problem. We'll even have a test at the end to verify the fix. Okay, so without further ado, let's dive right in. Okay, so I'm going to assume that your chain is properly tensioned to begin with, and that your bar nuts haven't backed off when you go to readjust the tensioner. Okay, so before taking anything apart, you'll want to check and see how the chain moves by hand. Make sure and use an old rag or a glove to protect your hand. And what you're looking for is any rough spots, binding, or areas that just feel inconsistent as the chain moves through the bar. Okay, so let's go ahead and remove the guide bar for a closer look. Okay, so I got the covers off and got everything cleaned up. You might have noticed from the clip at the beginning of the video I was using this as a stump grinder. I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to use a chainsaw as a stump grinder, and this thing was a mess. But we got it all cleaned up. So I wanted to talk about a stretched chain being one possibility. But if your tensioner, right here, there's a gap right here. This is where my tensioner was at while the chain was tight. But if your tensioner is all the way maxed out and your chain is still loose, you've probably got a stretched chain. You can also compare this side by side if you have a new chain handy. As you can see, my old chain is stretched a little bit. It's a little bit longer, but I don't think that's the problem because my tensioner is not all the way maxed out. Okay, so while we're here, let's talk about the drive links. If they are worn, burred, or even short, they won't sit correctly in the bar groove, and this can cause tracking issues while under load. The power from the drive sprocket comes from this side right here, so you're looking for damage. It's probably more likely going to be on that side right there. Now, if you think your chain looks fine, stick around until reason number 4, where I'll reveal to you what I believe is the actual culprit going on with this saw. So if you do feel like something is catching when you're moving the chain back and forth by hand, you're going to want to inspect the guide bar. You're going to want to look for uneven rail wear or different heights from one side to the other, pinched or wide areas in the groove, or anything that would prevent the chain from sitting flat. A bent guide bar can also cause inconsistent tension and poor tracking, so you'll want to make sure your bar is nice and straight as well. Now, if the groove looks dirty and packed with debris like mine is right here, you can use a small screwdriver to clean that out and go behind it with some compressed air if you have any, and make sure that the nose sprocket spins freely. My nose sprocket was a mess, so I had to use some cleaner, compressed air, and some patience. Okay, so if you think your guide bar and chain look fine, take a look at the tensioning mechanism. I went ahead and took it all apart. It's under this plate right here. Inspected all the parts, cleaned it all up, only to find I didn't see anything wrong. You'll want to make sure that the screw threads are all working smoothly. All the bushings holding it in place are not worn or broken either, especially if they're plastic like this one right here. And also be sure to check the engagement pin on the tensioner, that it looks like a nice round peg still, as well as the corresponding hole in the guide bar, that it's still a nice round hole. Okay, so here we are at the drive sprocket and what I believe is the most likely culprit with my saw. See all these extra grooves right here? Well, they're not supposed to be there. A worn sprocket won't drive the chain evenly and can absolutely contribute to tension issues and frequent loosening. Here's what a fresh one looks like. As you can see, the teeth are quite smooth, like it just came back from the dentist. Just go ahead and work your E-clip out of there. Very simple job. Now if you notice right here, there's a needle bearing right here. This one is actually in pretty good shape. It's only a couple of months old, but the one that I took out of there a couple of months ago, the little needle bearings were falling out, and that's how you'll know that that's bad. If you notice right here, there's a little notch right there. That corresponds to a little spring that's sticking out that's up inside of there. I won't be able to show that to you. I went ahead and drug it around so that it's lined up right here. That'll make it easy. I'll just line the notch up right there, and that should fit right on. Go ahead and put our chain guard back and the E-clip, and we should be ready for action. One more thing that I would check before putting it all back together is to make sure the oiling hole in the guide bar is not blocked with anything. And I would also start up and run your saw at a low RPM to verify that you see oil coming out of this little weep hole right here. Obviously, if your saw is either out of oil or the oil isn't circulating, that can heat things up a lot and cause all sorts of problems. As a rule of thumb, I like to top off the oil every time I top off the fuel. Okay, so let's get our chain reinstalled, making sure not to get it backwards. The chain turns clockwise, so on the top side of the bar, the teeth are facing the front, okay? These drags are usually going to be in front of the cutting teeth or closer to the cutting tooth than it is to the back of this next tooth, so you can tell right away right there. So that's it. If you wind up replacing your chain like I just did, you'll probably have to back your adjuster off to get the pin to line back up again. So my old chain was stretched pretty good. That looks pretty good right there. Let's give that a try. So one other thing is if your saw has these little plastic ears right here, this one is built into the cover, make sure that those ears are both intact. That kind of helps stabilize the chain. Okay, so I was able to slice this tree up all the way, sliced it up into little pieces small enough for me to carry it away, and that saw had no trouble whatsoever. It did really good. I checked the chain throughout the job, and it didn't seem like it was coming loose anymore on me. So I'm pretty happy with that. I believe the saw is fixed and back to its old vigorous self. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.